They said eventually you'll find it out there, along the hollow in the misty air.
Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I'm your host, and it's been a while since we've done an episode. It took a little bit of a break once the fantasy football season came to an end, but now it is about my favorite time of the year, at least of the offseason, is NFL free agency, when all the free agents across the league either re-sign with their teams or they sign with a new team. And it's really exciting to see all of these, faces in new places. And as a Vikings fan, free agency has been a little slow, but we did make an impact signing at probably the most, important position on the field. So in this video or podcast, we're going to be kind of breaking down all of the top free agent moves. And more importantly, going over their fantasy football impact for the upcoming 2026 fantasy football season. And I am recording this episode on March 15th. It is Sunday, March 15th, and it's actually like 1 a.m. So I've been meaning to record this podcast ever since, not right since free agency opened, but I wanted to kind of start it a little sooner. But the benefit of kind of waiting until now to record it is a lot of the big players have been signed. So we will get a very comprehensive overview of all the moves that have been done so far. And because free agency did open on, it looks like Wednesday, March 11th. So it's been open for a few days here. But yeah, before we get into it, please make sure to drop a like or follow/subscribe wherever you are enjoying. And if you want the video version of the podcast, you can head over to Fantasy Football Prodigy on YouTube, and you can see my ugly mug talking about some football. So we're going to go position by position and kind of break down the top signings of free agency. I'm going to focus more on the fantasy impact positions, like the skill position players that we draft for fantasy. So we're going to start at the quarterback position here. And Malik Willis was a free agent, and he signed with the Miami Dolphins, who needed a quarterback replacement after getting rid of Tua, who we'll talk about later. But Mike McDaniel is gone as a head coach, so it's a very new team. No Tyreek Hill there anymore. So Malik Willis does have some fantasy upside as a runner, and it's interesting because when he came into the league in his early days as a Tennessee Titan, he really struggled and it looked like he was just flat out bad. But in his time in Green Bay, he had a limited sample size, but in those games he actually looked pretty good, and he did flash as a runner. So there is a chance that he is surprisingly more relevant for fantasy than you might think. But obviously with no Mike McDaniel there, no Tyreek, it wouldn't surprise me if he's more of a middling type of guy. But he signed a 3-year, $67.5 million deal, $45 million guaranteed. And the way that I think I heard it was broken down is it's a little bit more front loaded, where they can maybe get out of it by the third year. They can get out of it pretty easily. I believe I heard there was no dead cap money. In the second year, they can also get out of the contract by eating, some amount of dead cap. But it's kind of a bit of a prove it deal from what I've heard. So Malik Willis, age 27, he's now relevant in Superflex leagues, maybe worth a shot at the end of your draft in a single quarterback league to see if something clicks. But I'm not expecting, huge things there. But it's a prove it deal to kind of see what he can do after flashing with the Packers. And then this is my favorite signing for probably the whole podcast here, and that's Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals heading to the Minnesota Vikings. It's a 1-year deal. I believe it's like it's a 1-year, $1.3 million deal. And I think this was the best move the Vikings could have made. We've been over the cap we were quite a ways over the cap. We've had to get rid of some players, but the Vikings were a really good team last year. They were honestly just a quarterback away from being relevant, and it hurts because we let Sam Darnold walk out the door. Daniel Jones was on our roster last year, and he looked really good with the Colts. And we got stuck with 9, who he did play a lot better down the stretch. So this will be a competition. I think Kyler Murray will probably be the starter, but if JJ McCarthy just had a really bad start, and the end of the season is kind of who he is now, maybe it becomes a battle in training camp. But the Cardinals are going to be paying for, looks like he had $36.8 million fully guaranteed from his contract with the Cardinals. So the Vikings were able to sign him for only $1.3 million. So it's a very low risk investment on a team that, is a little against the cap. I can't remember where they're at now, but I know we did have to cut a lot of people to kind of make some cap space. And yeah, I know there was a time when Kyler Murray was, looked at as a potential future superstar in Arizona. It kind of fizzled out. And, my hope as a Vikings fan is that, the Cardinals franchise as a whole maybe failed him just as much as he failed the Cardinals. There's obviously debates about his work ethic, and he had his whole Call of Duty phase where there was a lot to be made of his focus versus playing COD. I don't know how much of that is true versus blown out of proportion, but it I believe there was something in his contract back in the day that said he had to watch a certain amount of film or study a certain amount or something. So it's not a smash signing, but it's pretty much the best that the Vikings could do. And at that, with that contract being about the bare minimum you can get for a guy, I think it's a low risk, high reward type of thing. And it's good to have someone to turn to if JJ McCarthy isn't the guy, and having another somewhat competent quarterback that could be honestly really good. For the Vikings is great news for Justin Jefferson, who really struggled last year without good quarterback play. But yeah, it's honestly really good news for JJ, if anything. And Kyler Murray at one point was looked at as a potential future fantasy star with his rushing ability. So if he can kind of use his legs a little bit more than he has been lately, with those weapons around him, with Kevin O'Connell in that offense, I think it could be good news. Let's see. In terms of quarterbacks, though, I mean, Kirk Cousins is still out there. Aaron Rodgers, Marcus Mariota, re-signed with the Washington Commanders on a 1-year, $7 million deal, $11 million with incentives. Obviously, Jane Daniels is the guy there, but Daniels was hurt a lot last year, and Mariota played, pretty all right backup quarterback football for the Commanders last year when Daniels was hurt. So it's always good to kind of lock up that position. And then for the Falcons, they picked up Tua Tagovailoa from the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, that's bad news for Michael Penix, who's coming off that knee injury. And it remains to be seen who's going to be the starter. I think Tua is a little more proven than Penix at this point. I think it's probably it's somewhat good news for the receiving options there and for the offense that they have another guy that they could possibly turn to that could give them something versus going in with just Michael Penix. They don't have Kirk Cousins anymore. They released him. So, again, kind of like Kyler Murray, there was a time where Tua looked pretty legit and it kind of stopped working. It fizzled out, but now they have two left-handed quarterbacks there to compete for that starting position. So for guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, there's an opportunity where if at least one of those guys can give them good starting quality quarterback play, which is not guaranteed, but there's a chance there's fantasy goodness there. But we need one of these guys to step up and play well. And we'll see, when Michael Penix is ready to even play coming off that knee injury. Yeah, he signed a 1-year deal worth of veterans minimum. So, again, kind of like a low risk, high reward if he's able to kind of figure things out there. And then other than that, those are pretty much the big quarterback names. Looks like Jimmy Garoppolo is technically a free agent and he has not been signed yet, according to this list I'm looking at. I'm looking at a couple resources here. So this is on NFL.com. So we'll see. Hopefully this is all up to date. It looks like it is. So moving on to the running back position here. There were a couple really big signings at the position. And for fantasy football, this is arguably the most impactful position, especially, in a single quarterback league. And there are a couple big names that are going to impact teams for better and some guys who are, impacted for the worse. This is a winners and losers episode. So in addition to breaking down the player themselves, I kind of want to talk about the team as a whole. So Kenneth Walker III, Super Bowl MVP with the Seattle Seahawks last year and for his whole career, age 27. He is now on the Kansas City Chiefs. He signed a 3-year deal worth up to $45 million, $28.7 million guaranteed. And this is big news. It's... I think a lot of people are going to be very hyped about this signing, and they already are. And I see the excitement, but you could say the same thing if he would have signed from the Chiefs to Seattle. Like, oh my gosh, he's going to, this run heavy team that, they're able to, they have good defense, they can control the clock, yada, yada. It's kind of a similar situation. Now, Kenneth Walker in Seattle, the problem with him last year, even though he had a very impressive playoff and Super Bowl run once Zach Charbonnet had that ACL injury, is he was really splitting work more than ever with Zach Charbonnet healthy. And the thing about Kenneth Walker throughout his career is he has really always dealt with a ton of injuries. And it seemed to me like they were really trying to preserve him and not make him a bell cow running back in Seattle, which did make him really not super relevant for fantasy throughout the season. He's a big play type of guy, so that is something that the Chiefs have lacked for quite a while. And I think, with Andy Reid and that offense, I think there's going to be a lot of big performances here. I do worry for his sake that they could bring in another body in the draft. It's not a super strong running back class, so obviously, I don't think they're going to take Jeremiah Love after investing $45 million in Kenneth Walker. But if they take a running back in the 3rd or 4th round or something like that, wouldn't shock me. And it might be a little bit more of a split than you want. But, right now in the Chiefs backfield, Kenneth Walker, Amari DeMarcado signed there. They still have Brashard Smith. There's a guy named Shunderick Powell. So it's really him and a lot of nothing. So I do think they will bring in a rookie of some sort. How much of a split it's going to be remains to be seen. But, there is a lot of upside here with this landing spot. But I do worry that, what kind of workload is he actually going to get if they do bring someone else in? And if he is the bell cow, we would love that for fantasy, but we've seen him do that in the past and he has not been able to stay healthy. So when he's on the field, if he's getting the work, he's going to be good. And injuries are kind of funny. Like, you're injury prone until you're not. But I'm looking at but if he can stay healthy, obviously that is an exciting landing spot. But I'm looking at the fantasy football FFP rankings here for running backs coming up for 2026. It's a consensus of 14 experts, it looks like. And he is ranked as the running back 12, ahead of guys like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Breece Hall, Kyren Williams. Like, I don't know. I feel like that might be a bit of a stretch. Jeremiah Love is ranked one spot ahead of him. Saquon, and then Chase Brown. I'm not saying I hate the ranking, but, Derrick Henry's another year older. I believe they lost their center. To me, Josh Jacobs, it's hard to kind of not put him above Kenneth Walker just because of how proven he is in Green Bay. I know he got hurt late in the season, but he was really good. Bucky Irving, we'll talk about the Bucs backfield later, but there's some competition there. Breece Hall, Kyren Williams. Yeah, Kenneth Walker's probably in, that range. I would probably take Kenneth Walker over a guy like Breece Hall, maybe over Kyren. Bucky, maybe. I don't know. Because they did bring in a guy that we'll talk about in a little bit here, but it's interesting. But yeah, that's enough time on Kenneth Walker. Kind of rambled on him because he's kind of one of the bigger free agent signings of the offseason. But the other big running back signing is Travis Etienne, another 27-year-old running back, signing with the Saints. So it's a big loss for the Jacksonville Jags, where he spent the start of his career. So right now for Jacksonville, the depth chart is Bashal Tutin, Chris Rodriguez Jr., who they signed, LaQuint Allen Jr., and then DJ Dallas. So Bashal Tutin is a big winner here. We'll see what they do in the draft. They bring in any sort of competition, but it's looking like Tutin might have a chance to at least have a role. And then Chris Rodriguez, he actually played pretty well last year. He's never been like a bell cow back, but in limited opportunities, he's always looked pretty good. So he might be a sleeper. And then for the Saints, they get a really, I would say, a quality running back. There are kind of some questions about Travis Etienne's a lot of people wonder, like, how good is he as like a true runner? Like, obviously he's a great pass catching running back and he's been good for fantasy at times. 2 years ago, he was dreadful. And then this year he was a total value in drafts going super late. But the biggest loser here is going to be Alvin Kamara, who has, obviously former fantasy football superstar. How old is he now? He's 30 years old. He's going to be 31 in July. And, this could signal the end for Alvin Kamara here. His efficiency numbers have really been dipping a lot. It's really sad because he was one of the more electric players in the last 5 to 10 years in fantasy football at the running back position. He put up 6 touchdowns against my Vikings on, I think it was a Christmas Day game. So I think he wants to play in New Orleans. He could get traded. I don't know what his thoughts are on would he want to be traded. I've heard people say that he really wants to stay in New Orleans, and if not, there's a chance he retires. But obviously, only the player really knows that. But the Saints are a winner here. I think Travis Etienne at this point is a better player than Kamara, and it helps the offense. It helps Tyler Shuck and just the whole offense move the ball. And yeah, he's a very good pass catcher. We'll see if he can put together another good fantasy season. Obviously, the Saints offense looked really good with Tyler Shuck last season, with Chris Olave putting up prolific numbers, and Kellen Moore and that offense maintaining a high pace. So, it's not super exciting on the surface, but it might be, it wouldn't surprise me if he puts up, high running back 2, low running back 1 numbers. And in PPR leagues, depending on how they distribute the passes, and if they keep up that high pace of play, there's a chance that he's really good. So pretty exciting. And it is a 4-year, $52 million deal. So next up, the signing I was talking about, another 27-year-old running back, is Kenneth Gainwell to the Tampa Bay Bucks. He actually had a really good fantasy season down the stretch. He's a guy that he's always kind of been in backfields, and I've always wondered, why do teams not use him more? Because I've always heard these whispers that Kenneth Gainwell, he's this really good running back, and then in Philadelphia he wasn't really used a ton, but last season in Pittsburgh he got to actually play quite a bit. They drafted Caleb Johnson in I think it was 3rd round in the rookie draft, a running back. Barely used him at all. It was Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren, and Kenneth Gainwell just got better and better as the season went along. Very good pass catching running back. He was the MVP of the Steelers, voted by his teammates last year. So, they did let him walk on a 2-year, $14 million contract with the Bucks. The obvious loser here is Bucky Irving. I do think if you sign Kenneth Gainwell, who flashed what he did last year, to a 2-year, $14 million deal, that's decent money for a running back. It's not as big of a contract as these other guys, but I don't think they gave him that money to come in and be a clear backup. I do think he's going to be involved, and I do think Bucky Irving is a bit of a fantasy loser here. Now, his teammate, Rachaad White, is out of the picture now, but I think Kenneth Gainwell is probably a better player than Rachaad White at this point. So it's not like there wasn't someone there to take touches in the past, but Bucky Irving was a little disappointing last year, and he dealt with injury the injury just kind of lingered. Even when he came back, it didn't seem like he was the same, and he wasn't getting all the touches that I think a lot of us were hoping. So, I think obviously Bucky will still be very fantasy relevant, and depending on how the offense looks, maybe he's just great, but there's a little bit of concern there. And then, speaking of Rachaad White here, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, another 27-year-old running back, signing with the Washington Commanders on I'm not seeing his deal here. Let's see. Rashad. Well, okay, it's not coming up. Maybe it's over here. Rashad. So does anyone know Rachaad White's contract? Rachaad White contract. So it was a 1-year contract worth $2 million with incentives that could raise it to $4 million. Is that true? Wow, that is a really, really low deal. Really? Let's see. I'm on Spotrac here. It's not really It's not showing me anything. Oh, here we go. What? Signed a 1-year contract with the Washington Commanders. It doesn't have a value. The 1 year, 2 million thing was like the AI overview at the top. Seeing a Reddit thread that says 1 year, 2 million. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it looks like it's 1 year, 2 million. I don't know why that was so hard to find. But it's not a huge deal, but it's notable. He's a really good receiving back, not a very good runner, at least from what he's shown. And Washington needs running back help. They have been a rumored destination spot in the first round for rookie running back Jeremiah Love, who's kind of the cream of the crop at the running back position in an otherwise weak class. He's like a really good prospect. So right now on the roster, it's Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt or Bill, Rachaad White, and Jerome Ford. So you got a couple good running back 2s or maybe even 3s there, but seems like that's setting up for them to maybe take Jeremiah Love in the rookie draft. But yeah, if they don't take a big name, it looks like it's Bill and Rachaad White, which is not what they want. I bet they wish they had Brian Robinson now, which I think, is Brian Robinson a free agent? I think he might have been. I'll look that up. Brian Robinson free agency. I think he is. Yeah, he is a free agent from what I'm seeing here. Interesting. Okay, moving on. A 28-year-old running back, Rico Dowdle, formerly of the Cowboys and then last year on the Panthers, now signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers. A 2-year, $12.25 million deal. So there's some decent money there. So it's kind of like a revolving door of running backs here. So, you know, Rachaad White leaves Tampa Bay. Kenneth Walker is in. Rico Dowdle, or excuse me, Kenneth Gainwell leaves the Steelers. Rico Dowdle is in for the Panthers here. And then Rachaad White, obviously. Wait, I'm confusing myself. Did that all make sense? I think that all made sense. I hope that did. Make sure to smash like. Anyways, Rico Dowdle is, I traded a 2nd round pick for him in Dynasty last year because I really needed some depth, and I did win my 2nd championship of the last 2 years in my Dynasty League. So shout out to my Dynasty team, Prodigious, that's the name. Look for them in the Hall of Fame, on Sports Center, everywhere, on billboards. And Rico had a stretch. I traded for him after like 1 or 2 of his big games, but he had like 2 or 3 really big explosive games last year. It looked like he was going to take over the backfield for Chuba Hubbard, and then it became more of a split, and then it looked like Chuba was kind of the guy. But I think Rico Dowdle does have juice. I believe he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and I think he's a good player. Let's see. I'm clicking stats and nothing's coming up. Career. Wow. NFL. Can we fix our website here? Holy cow. Yep, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, 4.6 a carry. So, and I think he's used a little bit as a. He had 39 receptions each of the last 2 years. Last year for 297 yards. The year before 249. So a little bit of pass catching, but looking at this Steelers backfield here, you know, you might have thought that Caleb Johnson was a winner once Kenneth Gainwell was out of the picture, but nope, they brought in Rico Dowdle. He's going to be involved. The real question here is, what kind of split are we going to see between Rico Dowdle and Jaylen Warren in the Steelers backfield? Jaylen Warren, he had a solid year last year, but at least from the outside looking in, just from a fantasy perspective, it seemed like he was really getting more and more phased out compared to the beginning of the season. And he was kind of like a really solid running back 2 for one of my lineups at the beginning of the year. And then I got to a point where it's like, I'm just going to stop playing him because, you know, his touches are getting more limited. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but that's kind of what I remember the vibe being. So there is a chance that Rico Dowdle comes in and is kind of the guy you want. The only problem is Jaylen Warren is probably the better pass catcher. So it could be a real split where Rico Dowdle is kind of the hammer. Jaylen Warren gets more pass catches, and it's kind of, you know, no one's really a winner. You know what I mean? And then Caleb Johnson there. Oof, what a whiff. I drafted him in the 1st round of one of my rookie drafts. I should have just traded the pick. It was between him and like RJ Harvey, and I didn't like RJ Harvey. So I'm glad I didn't pick Harvey, but in hindsight, and if you have Harvey in Dynasty, I think he is a sell high, but Should have just traded the pick because they both ended up being terrible. But moving on, Tyler Algier. Oh, sorry, I should have said also another winner of the Rico Dowdle signing is Chuba Hubbard of the Panthers. There's a chance that he is the lead back in Carolina. We'll see what happens in the draft. Jonathan Brooks should be healthier coming off the ACL injury, the second significant ACL injury in not a very long time, but hopefully he's back and healthy for the man. For fantasy, you probably want it to be a one-man show, but there's a chance Jonathan Brooks is involved. Trevor Etienne wasn't super involved last year, but with Rico gone, there's a chance he gets some work. And then Tyler Algier from the Carolina Panthers, the backup behind Bijan Robinson, is now on the Arizona Cardinals. To me, this is a really gross signing. Tyler Algier has always seemed like a really good player. Even before they drafted Bijan, it looked like he was maybe going to be the running back of the future for the Falcons. Obviously, they brought in Bijan, and that blew that plan all up. But even still, Tyler Algier was very involved, even with Bijan there. Last year, it became a bit more of the Bijan show. But he's 26. It's a 2-year, $12.25 million contract. And surprisingly, the Cardinals did also bring back James Conner, who's getting older. He's coming off a big injury, but he's going to be on the team. They restructured his contract, so he's still there. So right now, the Cardinals backfield is James Conner, Tyler Algier, Trey Benson, and then they also signed Bam Zonovan Knight for some reason. So to me, this signals that they're maybe not the most confident in Trey Benson. Obviously, if they would have let James Conner walk, or cut him or traded him or whatever, and then brought in Tyler Algier, it becomes an interesting backfield of Tyler Algier and Trey Benson, where they might both have fantasy value, and one of them might have more value if they take a stranglehold of the backfield. With James Conner there, I don't see a way where he's not kind of the guy. Maybe midway through the season, if he doesn't have it anymore, they make a switch to someone. But they restructured his contract to keep him for a reason, I would think, right? Otherwise, why would you do that? So, but with that being said, even with James Conner as the starter, I do think Tyler Algier and Trey Benson are going to be involved, and I think Trey Benson is a pretty decent prospect. I have him and James Conner on my dynasty team, and we never really got to see Trey Benson like unleashed after James Conner went down last year, because shortly after Conner got injured, Trey Benson also missed. Didn't he miss the rest of the season after that point? Like he was going to come back, and it just kept getting pushed back and back and back, and then it's never happened. So we'll see how that shakes out. If someone can kind of take lead in that backfield, maybe there'll be value, but it might be gross. Obviously there's no Kyler there. Jacoby Brissett is there, so who's going to be the starter? They picked up Gardner Minshew as a backup, so we'll see kind of what happens there. But obviously, we still have the NFL draft. That's going to be a big factor in how these depth charts break down. So, it's good to break down the free agency signings when they happen, but that's just part of the puzzle. The draft and any more trades that happen are going to be big too. So, moving on to the wide receiver position, Alec Pierce, age 26, wide receiver of the Colts, re-signed with the team. He's been a really good downfield threat. Especially last year, he really broke out. He was actually dropped in my dynasty team. Now, granted, he should not have been dropped. He was dropped by a manager who isn't the most, they're not the most skilled dynasty player. But I did pick him up, and there wasn't really a big, I don't know if I had to bid anything to get him. If I did, it wasn't a big bid. And he really was impressive, especially him and Daniel Jones had a thing going, and he still had some big games later in the season too, even once Danny Dimes went down. But last year, he only had 47 catches in 15 games, it looks like. He still had over 1,000 yards, 1,003 yards, but over 1,000, 6 touchdowns, and he averaged 21.3 yards a catch. Very much so a downfield threat. The year before, he also averaged 22.3 yards. So, he is a big play guy. And the team did also get rid of Michael Pittman, traded him to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it was like a 6th, 7th round swap or something like that. So pretty crazy considering how good Michael Pittman is as a player. And I know, there are cap implications as well, but there's a real opportunity here for Michael Pittman to step up and be a focal point of his offense. I don't think he's going to really be a PPR guy, even with Pittman leaving. Keep in mind they do have Tyler Warren at tight end, so he's probably going to control the middle of the field a little bit more. Josh Downs is still there. Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield. But right now, Alec Pierce is going to have to play a big role on this team, and he got a 4-year, $114 million deal, $84 million guaranteed, $60 million guaranteed at signing. So, big play guy. The health of Daniel Jones is going to be critical to his fantasy success coming off the Achilles injury. But yeah, very, very talented field stretcher. Arguably the most exciting free agent in the wide receiver class, and he re-signed with his own team. So another player that re-signed with their own team, Rashid Shaheed for the Seattle Seahawks, got traded to the team from the Saints mid-season last year, and was impactful in the playoffs. Even when he wasn't being used as a receiver, it kind of seemed like he was the type of player that even if he wasn't showing up in the box score or great for fantasy, he was impacting the game, making plays on special teams. He's a speedy guy, and kind of the defense has to worry about him. So he did sign a 3-year, $51 million contract with the Seahawks, returning to the Super Bowl champions, and they gave him 3 years, $51 million, and they let Kenneth Walker walk, who signed 3-year, $45 million for his contract. So they gave Rashid Shaheed more money. I don't know. I don't see any guaranteed info about Rashid Shaheed. But that's, obviously Kenneth Walker would touch the ball more than Shaheed, but they obviously value Shaheed's impact away from the ball and on special teams, where they gave him a bag of money. And I'm trying to see if I can see his guarantees here. 34.7 million in guaranteed money, $20 million signing bonus, and that's just according to the AI thing. When you Google it, let's see, Spotrac. Let's see, $51 million, 3 years, $20 million signing bonus, 34.7 million guaranteed. That's what the Google thing said, the AI. So in terms of fantasy, I don't know if it's super relevant. I do think he will have games. He'll probably have a game, maybe 2, where he has a kick return and he gets a +6 points if you're in a league like that, which I think you should be, just for kick return touchdowns. But obviously JSN is still the guy there. Cooper Kupp is still there. And Rashid Shaheed is also there. So it's going to be the JSN show. They're going to have to figure out what to do in the backfield. Right now it's Zach Charbonnet, who's coming off the ACL. And then they did also sign Emmanuel Wilson. I didn't go over that because it's not a big name signing, and it wasn't even on this list, honestly. But Emmanuel Wilson from the Packers did sign with the Seahawks. So he looked good in spurts at times with the Packers. So do they roll into the season with Charbonnet and Emmanuel Wilson with, George Halani there too? Maybe they do, but they'll probably draft someone, I would think, even though it's not a great class. They probably bring in a body. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be super relevant for fantasy, this signing, but I do think it helps the Seahawks as a team if you are a Seahawks fan in real life. So, and I don't think it really hurts JSN either. I don't think it's like, oh, he's going to take away targets. Obviously, I think it's going to help the offense in general. I don't think it's the type of thing where he's going to lose targets to a guy like Rashid Shaheed. So a couple guys that stayed with their teams. Here's a guy that is moving teams that, honestly, it's a little surprising to me. And that's Mike Evans of the now San Francisco 49ers, formerly of the Tampa Bay Buck, Mr. Buccaneer. I was a little surprised by this move. I really thought he was going to retire a Buck. He signs with the 49ers, who need wide receiver help. It's a 3-year deal, up to $60.4 million with $16.3 million guaranteed. I think for fantasy, Mike Evans is a winner here. I know he's 33 years old. We see a lot of receivers at this stage of their career. They move teams, and it's like the beginning of the end, or it's really just the end, not even the beginning of the end. It just kind of drops off, and that very well could be the case. We really didn't get to see a ton of Mike Evans last year on the field. I don't think he's quite the player he once was. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. But I do think he will be fantasy relevant if he can stay healthy. Obviously, as you get into those mid 30 years, you can be a little bit more susceptible to injury, but he played 8 games last year, had 368 yards, 3 touchdowns. I don't know. I do think he left some games early, because there was that one game where he like broke his collarbone or whatever. Like week 7, against the Lions, he left early in that game. So kind of factors into the not great numbers, but the 49ers have Brock Purdy there at quarterback. They have McCaffrey out of the backfield. And then in terms of pass catchers, that's kind of where they need some help. So Ricky Pearsall is there. He actually looked pretty impressive at times. And then last year, once he came back from injury, he was just doo-doo. Like, he did nothing. Like, you might as well put me out there. Like, he was irrelevant. Juwan Jennings is a free agent still. So, it looks like he's not going to be back with the team. And, there's a real opportunity here for him to be the wide receiver 1. At tight end, George Kittle tore his Achilles late in the season. We'll see, when he's back and if he's going to be the same player. Let's see. He's targeting a return for the start of the 2026 season or early in the year. So he tore his Achilles in January. Achilles injuries are 9 to 12 month recovery. And this little AI write-up said it was considered a best case scenario. It's still a terrible injury, and he's getting older, so even once he's back, we'll see how impactful he is. He's the type of guy that strikes me as someone who maybe could still be good. He's 32, but coming off an Achilles, but he's a dog. But yeah, there's a real opportunity here for Mike Evans to be the guy, catch touchdowns. He's a big-bodied ex-receiver. And it wasn't a great year last year, had injuries, but I do think he still has something left in the tank based on last year. And he's on my dynasty team, so I watched him pretty close. And, there's sometimes they didn't connect on plays, but it looked like he still had something left. And obviously it's another year now, so we'll see. But, this obviously opens up the door for other options in Tampa Bay now that he's gone. So Emeka Egbuka, as Gronk says, is a big winner here. Fantasy darling as a rookie to start the year, then just crumbled and was worthless to end the year. Now Mike Evans is gone. It's going to be Egbuka, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, not McMillian, but maybe he'll be McMillions if he can get the end zone. Tez Johnson, they re-signed Kate Otten, and then Bucky Irving, Kenneth Gainwell out of the backfield with Baker Mayfield. So that team kind of fell apart later in the year, so we'll see if maybe they can kind of get things back on track next year. Wan'Dale Robinson from the New York Giants, age 25, signing with the Tennessee Titans. He signing a 4-year, $78 million deal with $38 million guaranteed. This is a signing that makes sense for the Titans. Cam Ward looked pretty bad last year, but near the end of the season, he started to play better, wasn't turning the ball over really at all. So Cam Ward is a big winner here. Desperately needed weapons. Calvin Ridley is there. Wan'Dale is there. Alec Ayamanor, Chamir Dike. They did lose Chiga Okonkwo at tight end. They have Gunnar Helm there at tight end. Maybe that opens up a door for him. But I don't see Wan'Dale being like, super great for fantasy. In New York, he was relevant based on PPR value. He's a guy that can rack up a lot of receptions. Didn't often do a lot with them. I know he had that one game against the Lions, and I think he had maybe another game or two where he put up big performances, but he's going to be relevant in PPR leagues. maybe not like a league winning type of guy on this Titans offense that doesn't project to be overly explosive. Obviously, a year 2 quarterback with Cam Ward, who was the first overall pick. You know, if he lives up to that draft capital, then okay, we're in business. But more of a PPR guy, like a flex type of guy, who, if the offense clicks, maybe he's more of a wide receiver too. And then Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers, age 26, signing with the New England Patriots, who released Stephon Diggs after losing in the Super Bowl. Romeo Doubs isn't like this alpha number 1 receiver. At least he hasn't shown to be that, but he's flashed at times with the Packers in the past, and he's always kind of been a type of this wide receiver committee in Green Bay. So now he actually has a chance to maybe, you know, set himself apart and put up like a true, I don't think he's going to be a number 1, like top 12 fantasy receiver, but, you know, be the guy on a team with a really good quarterback in Drake May. And they're going to have a tougher schedule this year. I think last year their schedule was so ridiculously easy. I don't know how it could be easier, you know, but it's an exciting opportunity for Romeo Doubs. I think if I'm the Patriots, I probably would have, you know, preferred like an Alec Pierce or maybe even Mike Evans if I'm trying to make a Super Bowl run. But the receiver free agency class really it's pretty weak this year, especially when 2 of the top options are re-signed with their own teams. So if you look at the other options, like Jawan Jennings is still out there. That's a guy that maybe has, I mean, I don't know. He's had some big games in the past. Like, I don't know. Kind of depends what you're looking for. But I think Doubs is a solid signing. It's about the best they could do. And, you know, they cut Stephon Diggs. That's a huge hole. I know it seems like he's washed, but he was very relevant at times last year. And, you know, he's 32. Romeo Doubs is 26. It's a 4-year deal. I don't know why for some of these people it's not showing me the contract, but for some it is. It's a little annoying. It's a 4-year, $68 million deal. So, I don't know the guaranteed money. I wish all of this info was in one source instead of having to go everywhere. Well, this is saying 4 years, 80 million. So, hey guys, let's which it can increase from 68 to 80 with incentives. Okay. I'm not seeing guaranteed money even on Spotrac. Weird. Huh. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, so I don't know. But yeah, he's going to be impactful there. There's not a ton of other weapons there. It's Kayshon Boutte, Mac Hollins, Demario Douglas, and maybe those guys are relevant. They're probably a team that's going to draft somebody, I would assume, at receiver. You know, Hunter Henry's there at tight end still. No more Austin Hooper, so at tight end as of this recording. And then, yeah, Jawan Jennings, he's one of the top remaining free agents here. We got Jawan Jennings, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel. We'll probably talk about them once we go over the top remaining free agents. I think that would probably make the most sense. Actually, let me see here. Why is this? Okay, interesting. Actually, let's just talk about him now. So, Jawan Jennings was on the 49ers last year. He and previously, age 29. He's kind of been a little bit of a sleeper player over the years, but he's kind of broken out a little bit, especially 2 years ago. And then at the end of last year, he had some games where I really needed him in my dynasty league, and he came up big. He's another guy that I picked up off of waivers a while back, and he's been really relevant. So we'll see where he goes, but he is an interesting name. If he goes to the right spot, it could be good for fantasy. Stephon Diggs is released. He's 32 now. He doesn't look like he's the same player as he used to be, and he's got some legal issues. So we'll see what happens with the legal matter. That's going to be a huge thing. Deebo Samuel, again, another player that seems like he's lost a step, especially a guy like him who's not a great true receiver, but really good with the ball in his hands. So a guy like that, once he loses a step, it's not as great for a guy like that because he really relies on his athleticism, and it looks like he's not quite as fast, not as good of a tackle breaker. And at the start of last year, there were times where it looked like he would be fantasy relevant, and it really, really went away down the stretch. Granted, a lot of injuries on that team. Jaden Daniels himself was hurt a lot. So, but I think there's a reason that they did cut him. So we'll see where he goes. Again, depending on the landing spot, it's possible that he's relevant. And then a couple other big signings here. Jalen Naylor, formerly of the Vikings, signed a 3-year, $35 million deal with the Raiders, $23 million guaranteed. Look, he was playing behind Jefferson and Addison with the Vikings, and he really flashed at times, and he had some big games in his time with the Vikings. I am sad to see him go from the Vikings. Obviously, you know, in terms of wide receiver 3s, I love him. Maybe even as a wide receiver 2, he can step up, but with our cap situation, we couldn't really afford, I'm on the team, the Vikings couldn't really afford to give him a big deal. And 3 years, $35 million. I don't think anyone expected that type of money. Even though, you know, I think people have eyes. Like, people know that there's a chance he's better than his production because he played behind 2 other really good receivers. But is this going to be a thing where he breaks out and he's super good? Or is this the Raiders being the Raiders and they're signing a receiver to a lot of money who can run kind of fast, and he's not really like, you know, he's not going to be all that. Like, he's not going to be a wide receiver 1. That's probably the case. And they're going to draft Mendoza, and we'll see. Obviously, if he's got to put up some level of production to support these options, but there's an opportunity for Naylor to be fantasy relevant. I'm not like hating it. The money was a little surprising to me, but Brock Bowers is the number 1 there at tight end. But in that receiver room, you know, it's Jack Besh, Trey Tucker, Deontay Thornton. Like, they need weapons there. And they obviously have Genty out of the backfield, but he's going to be, you know, obviously he's going to be behind Bowers on the target pecking order. But in terms of wide receivers right now, I'd say he's their best receiver that they have, you know, and that requires attention, right? Especially because he has shown that he looks like a decent player at minimum. So, and then Calvin Austin is another big free agent here at running back, or excuse me, at wide receiver. And I did see that Darnell Mooney signed with the Giants recently, so I scooped him up in Dynasty. Someone cut him. I don't know if that's going to be super relevant. I mean, they have Neighbors, Slayton, Mooney. Oh, wait, did Calvin Austin sign there? I literally just clicked on the Giants depth chart and it says Calvin Austin. This must be out of date. Hey guys, if you're going to have a source, can it be up to date? You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to see if there's any other signings I missed here. So is Debo still a free agent? Yep. Okay, he's good. And then, there's an article that says reuniting with Debo Samuel suddenly makes more sense after Mike Evans signing. Can you imagine? Goes back to San Fran. And then, yeah, Calvin Austin looks like he got signed with the Giants. Yep, so leaving the Steelers, signing with the Giants. I don't think it's very relevant, but he made plays at times. Very deep league dynasty stash maybe, but that's it. Then finally, we got the tight end position here. K. Dotton re-signing with the Bucks. I don't think he's going to be super relevant. Maybe a streamer at times if other options get injured. And with Mike Evans gone, you know, maybe that increases his floor a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be a difference-making player. He is signing a 3-year, $30 million deal with $20 million guaranteed. So good for him. That's awesome. Doesn't have to move houses, so that's always great. And then kind of the probably biggest tight end signing in a free agency, Isaiah Likely signing with the New York Giants. Spent his whole career in Baltimore behind Mark Andrews. Now he finally gets a chance to be the guy for the New York Giants. We're doing a lot of Giants talk, so there's a lot of weapons here now with Malik Neighbors, Cam Scatterbook, and Tyrone Tracy out of the backfield. They've been rumored to maybe be a candidate for Jeremiah Love in the draft, I've heard, which is kind of surprising. But with Cam Scatterbook coming off the injury, I don't know. Seems kind of interesting to me. I'd probably just roll with Scatterbook and have Tracy out there while he gets healthy. But I guess maybe they're skeptical that he'll be healthy and good to go at some point. But yeah, Malik Neighbors coming off an injury, but once he's healthy, he's obviously a stud. And then yeah, after that, Darius Slayton, Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin, like guys that belong on a roster for sure. But Isaiah Likely has an opportunity to maybe be the number 2 pass catcher, at least in the intermediate short area of the field. And he is an explosive guy that can make plays down the field too. So very athletic guy. It's exciting to see him as a potential starter. Yeah, I always thought that he would have a chance to start and be the guy with the Baltimore Ravens, but it just never really happened. They always kept him and Andrews. So it's a 3-year, $40 million deal. It can go up to 47.5 with incentives. And again, it's not showing me the guarantee. Say a likely contract. So looks like I'm not seeing the guarantees. I always like to know the guaranteed money. Yeah, I'm not seeing it even on Spo Track. That's interesting. Guaranteed money, if I look that up. It looks like it's not announced yet for some reason. That's what I'm seeing. So maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not seeing any guaranteed money. So yeah, that's the biggest tight end signing for sure. He's 26. With Jackson Dart at quarterback, he gets another weapon, so it helps him. I'd say it hurts the Ravens offense, but it probably helps Mark Andrews, who has kind of been fading for fantasy. But if Likely's not there, then maybe that gives him a higher floor. But hurts Lamar, obviously, losing that weapon. But yeah, it's exciting for Isaiah Likely and for the New York Giants offense and for Jackson Dart. Chiga Okonkwo left the Titans, like I mentioned. He's signing with the Commanders. So Chiga Okonkwo is an interesting player, signing a 3-year, $30 million deal. And he's always been this athletic freak. Hasn't really put it together for fantasy for a full season. He's had runs where he's been really good. But Ben Sinnott is a big loser here for the Commanders. Zach Ertz is a big loser in that he's probably either not going to resign, or if he does resign, he's not going to be the clear number 1 tight end. If you don't know who Ben Sinnott is, he was drafted in the 2nd round a couple years ago, I believe it was. And yep, round 2 in 2024, pick 53. And, a lot of people were excited for him to get a chance to be the guy if Zach Ertz wasn't there. But yeah, looks like that's not going to happen. So right now it's McLaurin, Diami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, Van Jefferson, Traylon Burks, Chiga Okonkwo at tight end. At this point, he might be their 2nd most exciting pass catcher. So I think they will address that, in the draft. They kind of have to, or maybe they sign one of these, free agents that's available, like Jawan Jennings or something. But I don't know their cap situation, but they need another weapon. And then those are kind of the big ones, like Charlie Kohler, kind of more of a run blocker, was in Baltimore, signs with the Chargers, 3-year, $24.3 million deal, $17 million guaranteed. We have the guaranteed info for Charlie Kohler, thank goodness. But I guess that helps the running game for the Chargers. Current free agents, Dallas Goedert. And again, I'm going to double check these because this list has proven to be not always up to date. So it looks like he's talking to the Eagles about a return. It looks like they're pushing back the deadline of the void date of his contract to March 16th, which today is the 15th as of this recording. So we'll see kind of what develops there. He's already 31. That's interesting. He seems like someone that would be younger, but I used to have him in Dynasty, so I kind of know he's a little older than you would think. Darren Waller is still a free agent, which is so funny that he's back in the league and he was relevant last year. But and then David Njoku is still a big name that's remaining. Obviously last year it wasn't great with Harold Fannin coming in with the quarterback play not being great, even though they had 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks or 3 or whatever it was. But if you remember a couple years ago, he really won people leagues at the end of the season. And I was kind of surprised to see them bring in Harold Fannin. But, I get it. He's younger and, Njoku's now This says 29. That says 30. Guys, hey, can we at least get the age right of these players? Like, my goodness. I think he's 29. I think he's going to be 30 during the season. Let's see. Yeah, so in July, he will be 30. Okay, got it. Very interesting. It says age 30 on NFL.com. But he's an athletic guy. If he goes to the right landing spot, he could be a fantasy difference maker. Yeah, we'll see where he goes. Like, does he sign with the Ravens with likely gone, depending on the money? Maybe the Eagles go with him instead of Dallas Goedert. Dolphins are a good spot, right? Because I think Waller was there last year. They don't really have a guy. So, I mean, again, I don't know the cap situations off the top of my head of all these guys. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But, yeah, they got Dulcich in Miami and Ben Sims. So, they need a guy. Other than that, I mean, I can kind of I'm just looking at this NFL.com list, like some tackle signings. Rashid Walker to the Panthers at tackle. 1-year deal. Max of $10 million. Jeremy Illuminer. Looks like he's a pretty good tackle. He's re-signing with the Giants. Braden Smith of the Texans re-signing. Jawan Taylor's still out there. Braxton Jones signing with the Bears. Is this relevant for you guys? I don't know if you care. Taylor Decker, that's kind of a big one. He's a free agent. He asked for the Lions to release him. So that's kind of a big option at tackle that's out there. He's getting older. Maybe like a 1-year, 2-year guy. Big interior offensive lineman move. I know that the Ravens lost their center, Tyler Linderbaum. He signed a 3-year, $81 million contract with the Raiders. So I get it, man. Like, you got to get your money. So he's I believe he's the highest paid center. He's only 26 years old, so the Raiders got a good player there. Elijah Vera Tucker signing with the Patriots at guard, so that's good for that O-line. He's coming off a torn triceps before the season started, but long term it should be fine. 3-year, $42 million deal, $21 million guaranteed, so that's a good deal there. What else? I mean, David Edwards, guard to the Saints, Zion Johnson to the Browns, Isaac Suamalu to the Cardinals, Cade Mays to the Lions. So I don't know if I want to read all these, but Kevin Zeitler's out there. I've heard that name. I think he's a pretty good guard. Then yeah, I don't want to really get too into the weeds with the defensive stuff. Obviously, for fantasy, we want defenses to be bad to target them, and like we saw with the Cowboys last year, if your team's defense is bad, your offense is going to be forced to try to score more. So that was a very good fantasy recipe for success for Dallas last year. But I do want to talk about the Trey Hendrickson situation with the Maxx Crosby deal, signing a contract with the Ravens, and then the deal falling through because of a physical, and then the Ravens then going ahead and signing Trey Hendrickson. So I want to know what. Let's see. Okay, so it was a trade. So he was going to be traded for 2 first-round picks to Baltimore, right? Maxx Crosby was. He was on a 3-year, $106.5 million deal. Maxx Crosby. Huge trade, one of the biggest trades in a while, and then all of a sudden they do a physical. The Ravens say, nope, we're not doing the deal. The trade gets reversed. They get their picks back. Now they sign Hendrickson to a 4-year, $112 million deal with $60 million guaranteed and a max value of $120. So 4 years, $112. Maxx Crosby is on a 3-year, $106. So there's another year for Trey Hendrickson with only an additional 5.5 million. Now it could go up to 120 million, but still, it makes you wonder, like, how much of it was really the physical and how much of it was, ooh, we could keep our picks. We can get Trey Hendrickson, who's also a fantastic player, for a more reasonable price tag. Hendrickson's 31, Maxx Crosby's 28. And, you know, Maxx Crosby is one of the greatest defenders in the league on a terrible team, you know, and I would have loved to see him in Baltimore, but it kind of screws things up. Like, for, you know, a lot of teams made decisions based on that deal. And, you know, now the Raiders are like, it looks like he's going to play for the Raiders unless they get another crazy deal like that. So I was happy for him to be on a team that has a chance to be good. Now he's stuck on the Raiders, and I'm a really big fan of him. So I think it's just kind of an odd situation. You know, I'm not behind closed doors. We don't know, but the Ravens have done things like that in the past from what I've heard. I think they did it with Michael Crabtree, I want to say. And they might have done it another time too. Let's see. Like, they signed someone, it was like something Branch. And then they rescinded the deal, or they went back on it, and then they signed Michael Crabtree. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember his name. Something Branch. I just heard about it on a Cliff Branch. Is that it? That's coming up. Is that a guy? No, that's no. Nope. I can't remember. Reverse trade Michael. Long story short, I heard they've done this in the past. So I don't know. It's a little concerning. Weird. Anyways, I can't find it, but yeah, I don't want to talk too much about the defensive stuff. We're already at like an hour here, so there are still some good free agents out there, defensively, offensively. Yeah, but anyways, who's still available here? So in terms of who's still left, Juwan Jennings, in terms of fantasy relevance, he's still there, like we talked about. Stephon Diggs, some wide receivers, Deebo Samuel. Those guys are going to impact things for fantasy. It might not be super relevant, or it might be relevant. We really just don't know as of this recording on very early March 15th. It's 2 a.m. Aaron Rodgers, you know, is he going to play? I think so. I do think he's going to play. Where is he going to play? I don't know. He could retire though. He could. He really could. So we'll see. But he is 42 now, or he's going to be 42 entering the season at least. He's 42. So, Kirk Cousins is out there. He is still a free agent. He was a candidate to maybe return to the Vikings, but obviously, you know, now that Kyler is there, it looks like that's not going to happen. Let's see. So yeah, we'll see. He appears to be washed to some degree. You know, he's 38. He really made a lot of money as a player, so I'm happy for him, and I really like him as a guy. He seems like a very, like, I don't know, like I watched that quarterback documentary on Netflix, and he seems like a good teammate and a hard worker, and he got a lot of hate on the Vikings, it felt like, but it seemed like he was a very high quality player for a lot of the time that I've been watching football. So it's kind of sad when you see these guys get older, and, you know, he had the Achilles injury. And there were times last year where he actually like played okay, you know. Obviously he's not the same player that he once was, but yeah, he's still out there. Njoku, like I talked about at tight end. Hollywood Brown is a free agent. I actually didn't even realize that he was still out there. I don't know if he's going to be super relevant wherever he goes, but he is out there. Trying to see if there's anyone else. Jonnu Smith. Is he a free agent still? Really? That's so interesting how he didn't even appear on that list. because he got cut by the Steelers. So a couple years ago, he was a like star for fantasy. Granted, a lot of it was because of the situation, but man, if he goes to the right spot, like for the Steelers, they used 3 tight ends. They had DK Metcalf out wide, who they didn't use enough, but still he was there. And it's like Johnny was not utilized nearly like he was for the Dolphins a year prior. And if he goes to the right spot, he might be a sneaky pick. Let's see. Any other big names here? I'm just kind of scrolling through the list. Christian Kirk at wide receiver, Joe Flacco at quarterback, Brian Robinson, like I mentioned, Russ. Those are kind of the big names that are showing up on the top of the list here. So it looks like all the big dogs are pretty much signed at this point. So I feel like this is a good point where this was a good point to make this video where we can kind of get a good lay of the land. And again, we're gonna, here I can sort by position here. We're gonna kind of see what the draft holds, but did I say J.K.? I didn't talk about this, but J.K. Dobbins is back with the Broncos. So it's gonna be him and RJ Harvey, and I don't know, RJ Harvey doesn't appear like he's the guy. So if you have him in Dynasty, I'd probably trade him. And I've heard rumors that they might like try to bring someone in like in the draft or something, I've heard. So I don't know. Maybe that won't happen, but I don't think the team is super impressed with Harvey. It's kind of giving CEH vibes, not gonna lie. And yeah, Tyquan Thornton re-signed with the Chiefs. Kendrick Bourne to the Cardinals. Khalif Raymond went from the Bears to the went from the Lions to the Bears. Not a super relevant signing at first when you look at it, but he's a great special teams player, and that does kind of open the door for Isaac Tesla to maybe really be the solidified wide receiver 3 on the Lions behind Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams. Obviously you have Laporta at tight end, Gibbs in the backfield. Gibbs might be the 1-1, him or Bijan, after they traded away David Montgomery to the Texans. So there's a lot going on in fantasy. I'm trying to make sure I cover all kind of the free agency signings here. I think I covered all the big ones, guys. If I missed anything, please feel free to put it in the comments. Because I want to make sure these episodes are informative. But I really do think we touched on all of the big signings. In terms of like trades, like Michael Pittman getting traded to the Steelers, that's a huge one. So it's going to be him and DK Metcalf out wide for Pittsburgh. We kind of talked about the Colts side of things, but it's a big win for the Steelers offense. I don't know. I mean, it should be kind of a downgrade for Metcalf, but he wasn't really great for fantasy last year. So I don't know if this opens things up for the offense. I don't know. Maybe it helps, but if anything, it's probably neutral. What else? I mean, it's a defensive move, but there was that big trade where Trent McDuffie went from the Chiefs to the Rams, like a superstar corner, a lot of draft capital going back to the Chiefs. Seems like a kind of a win-win trade there. Trying to make sure I don't miss any big trades. And then obviously David Montgomery going from the Lions to the Texans with Joe Mixon being released. That is that's a big, it's going to be fantasy relevant. Obviously Woody Marks is a kind of a loser in that situation. I wasn't really high on him being the guy going into the season one way or another. It didn't seem like he didn't have like bell cow workhorse back written on him. Like, I think he's a decent player, but it's going to be him and Woody Marks and David Montgomery. Montgomery gets a step out of the shadow of Gibbs, but in Detroit, you have a much better offense with a ton of goal line opportunities. Like 2 years ago, I don't know why I said it like that. I am from Minnesota. That was like so good for Montgomery, where he was actually very involved getting those red zone carries. And Gibbs was also involved, but it was like more 50-50. Last year, we saw Gibbs really kind of take over and be the guy. So I do think Montgomery had to leave to have a chance of being relevant for fantasy. So he has a chance here to actually get some volume. Scoring opportunities might not be as plentiful as they were in Detroit, but the more and more that we went along in Detroit, he was getting phased out. So I do think ultimately it was good for his value to be moved. Other than obviously if Gibbs were to go down, Montgomery would be like a league winner, which probably isn't going to be the case in Houston, where he's probably more likely to be like a middling, running back 2, kind of touchdown dependent. We'll see what the offensive line, looks like, and the offense in general, and how much Woody Marks is involved, and if they bring in anyone else. But yeah, guys, I think we covered all we needed to cover here. I think we talked about all the free agent signings. So yeah, hopefully that was informative and helpful. Thank you for watching, as always. I really do appreciate it. It's been a while since we posted a pod, but good to be back. I'm going to be traveling here coming up I'm traveling for like a week, and then I'm back, then I'm traveling for another week. So videos might not be super common coming up, but obviously once the season ramps up, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the draft, any big news. So yeah, make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button, and head over to YouTube, Fantasy Football Prodigy, if you want to see my face. Hello, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.